Vignette number 81 from Zen Is Right Here, Teaching Stories and Anecdotes of Shunryu Suzuki. As I was telling Suzuki Roshi what a disaster my life had become, he began to chuckle. I found myself laughing along with him. There was a pause. I asked him, what should I do? Sit zazen, he replied. Life without zazen is like winding your clock without setting it. It runs perfectly well, but it doesn't tell time. That was Sidney Walter at the Zen Center in 1970. Yeah. Well, that does remind us that if Suzuki Roshi brought one thing to America, it was practice. And when you open his practice box, there's basically one thing in it, and that's zazen, and extending zazen. Everything that isn't zazen is just zazen that's not sitting. You know, he really emphasized that a lot. So much so that people would you get tired of people saying, that zazen was the solution to every problem. Because at the same time, he wasn't really teaching that. It was just like the foundation. And, if you had a problem like you were flunking out of school and went to him and said you were worried about your grades, I don't think zazen would be a sole remedy. Anyway, I remember Mark Lewis, who was in high school when he started sitting with us, when he started coming to Tatsuro. He was in high school out there in Carmel High. And he said he would sit zazen before a test. And, he would include zazen in his studies for a big test. And that was very impressive. When he first arrived, people would come to him. They'd read about Zen, Alan Watts, and T.T. Suzuki, neither of whom mentioned zazen much at all, hardly at all. So they'd have ideas of, koans or working with a Zen master to have an enlightenment experience. And he'd just say, well, I practice zazen every morning at, I'm not sure what time it was then, maybe 5:30, and or at 6. I think it might have been more like 5:30. And please join me. I mean, that's what he said over and over. That was the first thing. Come to zazen. It wasn't come to lecture. It was come to zazen. A lot of people did begin by going to his lectures. Sometimes when he was asked to meet with people, he'd say, let's sit. And he'd show them what it was. And it was very new then. It's not like now. It's just the whole idea of just sitting there and following your breath. And like he said to Bill Kwong, when Bill Kwong first came in 1960, I think, maybe he came in 59 or 60. He said, I want to show you how to sit there and do nothing. So, we think, well, what is Zazen? Is it doing nothing? Well, you can't do nothing. But it's not following the thought stream. It's intentionally following the breath or focusing on our body. It's becoming aware of awareness. And I think above all, what Zazen is finding out what Zazen is. Getting beyond being trapped in a small idea of self and getting beyond preferences and enslavement to emotions, etc. But, a period of being still at first, being very still, and just experiencing oneself that way. And then having periods in the day where one does that, and then extending that into one's daily life, where one extends that sort of awareness, that sort of attention into dealing with things and activity, but also when there's a pause, being able to just relax and follow one's breath, pay attention to one's feet when one walks. It depends. We have to think. We think a lot. We're not going to stop thinking. Thinking is our great tool. But like Alan Watts said, good tool, bad master. But, of course, everything has to be in balance. If people were overemphasizing Zazen and trying to sit Zazen too much, he'd suggest, well, just sit Zazen when the rest of it said, like if you're living in Tassara. Or if somebody was leading a lay life in the city, they said, I'm trying to sit Zazen as much as I can. He'd say, well, just try to sit one time a day, or if you can, 2 times a day. And he really emphasized daily sitting. He emphasized that, and also would not be overly supportive of people wanting to do a lot of sesshin, a lot of, concentrated weeks of zazen. He'd say, doing 1 sesshin a year is good. 2 is good. And he did lead with zazen, but again, it was in balance. So, returning to what Suzuki said to Sidney Walter, zazen is setting our clock so that as we wind it, what is winding it? Getting up in the day, eating, making money, just doing the things we do. So zazen is setting the clock. Now, what are we setting the clock to? I think we're setting it to now. This has been a Cuke Audio mini podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. Wishing you, and yours, and all of us, a grand awakening.